topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Alise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. This program has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, and if we've not met before and you don't know me, I'm an organizational psychologist and logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I at Gusto Now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by building a dynamic, high-performance culture and inspirational leadership activated by meaning and purpose. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal site, alisecortez.com. I have a very special surprise for you for this evening's conversation. This is going to be your early Christmas present. We have with us today Richard Barrett, a globally recognized thought leader in values-based leadership, cultural transformation, personal development, and the metrics of personal, cultural, and societal well-being. He is the president of the Academy for the Advancement of Human Values, the founder of the Barrett Values Center, the leader of the Global Humanity Awareness Initiative, the developer of the Barrett Culture Analytics for Organizations and Global Well-being Indicators for nations. Also a fellow of the World Business Academy, a former values coordinator at the World Bank. He's also a founding member of the V20 Values Task Force for the G20. He has written numerous books, one of which is What My Soul Told Me, which I also read. Richard, a hearty welcome to Working on Purpose. I'm so delighted to have you on.
Well, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be talking to you all the way from London.
Thank you for joining me. And as I told you when I first reached out to you, I learned about you and your work, Richard, through my mentor, Lance Secretan, who has written also about 22 books or so. And when I heard what you were doing, and especially around your soul work, consciousness, etc., I was like, I really want to talk to this man. So thank you for saying yes.
Glad to be with you. What can I say?
And I love how part of what was so enticing about getting to talk with you, I love how you talked about showing up for a speech in the Netherlands years ago, and you hadn't really been in touch with the organizers, and so you didn't really know what they wanted you to talk about. So you just asked one person in the audience, what do they want to hear about? And then from that, you just consulted your soul and delivered a fantastic talk. So I thought we could do the same here.
Let's get started.
So the soul, of course, I've now read Soul-Centered Living from Survival to Service, and of course, What My Soul Told Me, and part of the New Leadership Paradigm. And I have never had anybody so beautifully explain how our souls come to us. So let's just start there, shall we?
Well, yes. Well, let's just start with a little correction. You don't have a soul. No, you are.
I am the soul. Yes, thank you. I hear you saying that.
Yes. And that's a game changer when you actually realize that, because it means that you have a point of reference for everything to do in your life that you want to do in your life. Well, who is the you that wants to do it? Well, the soul incarnated into your body, let's put it that way, with a few ideas about what it might want to do in your life. And as long as you stay in touch with that, you will have a lot of plain sailing. That isn't to say it'll be totally smooth, but you'll be on the right track in terms of meaning and purpose and the things that you talk about in the introduction to this program.
Well, and I appreciate that. You also said something I recognized when I was reading your book, something about, if you can get if you don't align your ego with your soul, then the soul won't fully express itself.
Yes, well, you know, the ego is very helpful in many ways, and it develops during the first 20 years of your life, and it identifies with the body, and it lives in a particular culture or experience and a family setting, and it has needs, and the needs are to survive, feel safe, and to feel secure. So during those first 20 years, that's what you're focusing on. That's what the ego is focusing on. And depending on where you live and your parents and all and the culture you're brought up in, you're going to learn how to be in that world and get your needs met. Now, it may be quite difficult. Not everybody is born to self-actualized parents. They may have very difficult lives, and they learn what I call maladaptive beliefs. They learn that, you know, it's hard to survive, or it's hard to be loved, or they may have a parent who says you'll never amount to anything, and so it's hard to be to get everything in place. And so the ego develops fears, and it's those fears which, let's put it this way, rock your boat during the next few years of your life. And it's the fears that prevent the soul from showing up, because the energy of fear cannot mix with the energy of love. The energy of love is the energy of the soul, and the fears of the ego get in the way. So the first job to do, as soon as you begin to realize that you can self-actualize and you can self-realize, is to identify what these fears are that are holding you back and try to master them, and or get over them. Not easy, but mastering your fears is the first step in leading yourself. We're talking about leadership here as well. And so leading yourself is, well, how am I going to lead myself if I can't get in touch with my essence? And my essence is my soul, and my soul knows why it came, what its mode of self-expression is, what it wants to do. And so you have to try to get over those fears, to allow that space for self-transformation in order to become what eventually become one with your soul. As I say, in what my soul told me, eventually you become one with your soul, but there's a journey in there. The journey starts with being aware of your soul, connecting with your soul, befriending your soul, trusting your soul, and finally becoming one with your soul.
Mm-hmm. A couple of things that spark from that, Richard. One is that I believe that you referenced David Hawkins' work in your book, his map of consciousness. Yes.
I'm very into consciousness, very much. And I'm writing a new book right now about becoming conscious.
Yeah, and it's very much a topic of interest for me too. And I had come across his work. In fact, I've now read 2 of his 9 series of books. Just a lot
to go through.
I'm in this, Richard. You can see why I reached out to you. I'm like, I got to have this man on. And when your next book comes out, we'll have to have you come back on and talk about that. But so the idea of, when you mentioned before, fear and love can't coexist, and I appreciate that on his map of consciousness, fear is like on the scale of 0 to 1,000. What is it, like 150 or something like that?
200, yeah.
And love is at like 500 or something. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. So then the other thing I would love for you to do for us, Richard, is if you could generate, as you did in the book, you talk about, if I have this, something about, our soul thrusts itself onto our physical being. So you talk about like the 3rd and the 4th dimensions or something like that. Could you explain that?
Yeah. Okay. So we think we believe at the ego level that we live in a 3-dimensional material physical world, and because that's our experience once we're born, that's the world we live in. But actually, the soul lives in an energetic world, and that energetic world is a higher order world than the physical world. And so in the energetic world, you cannot die. The soul cannot die, whereas the ego, because it's attached to the body, believes it can die. Now, where does the ego come from? Well, the ego is the creation of the soul, actually, and the soul creates the ego within a few months of your I was going to say of being born, but actually in the womb. And as you move into the world as a baby, you begin to find separation. Now, the soul lives in a world of total connection and love, and you enter into a world of separation and fear. Now, depending on how well you're looked after by your caregivers and parents, that can be an easy transition. But for many people, it's not an easy transition from, and so the soul creates this psychic entity called the ego to act as a buffer from the pain of separation. Now, the ego can also create psychic entities, and we call them alter egos. So this is not too far-fetched. We know about alter egos, and so the soul creates the ego, and the ego creates alter egos when it cannot deal with what's going on. It develops another personality. You have to be pretty, how shall I say, in difficult circumstances before you start creating alter egos. But anyhow, the soul creates the ego, and then the ego doesn't know it's the creation of the soul and goes about its work of protecting the body, which is the vehicle of the soul. And so in that sense, the soul is happy to have the ego look after its physical life. But let's not forget that the soul actually is in an energy field, and that energy field is a higher dimension of consciousness, and everything in the world is energy. Now, so gradually, that's when the ego begins to develop fears, which build this, which because of the separation, and it's very difficult for the soul and the ego to blend together in their motivations if the motivations of the ego are fear-driven and the motivations of the soul are love-driven. Anyhow, that's the journey that we're all on, and really that blending depends on two things. One, were you born to self-actualized parents who are not too directive, but help you to grow and develop in your own way? And to what extent are you able to overcome the fears that the ego develops in getting its survival, safety, and security needs met? Now, if you can do that, and then you begin to self-actualize, and from self-actualization, you move to self-realization. Now, self-actualization is different from self-realization. Self-actualization is becoming all you can become in the cultural framework of your existence. You self-actualize and you become the best version of yourself, but within that framework of existence. Self-realization takes you to a whole different level, where you finally unite with the soul, and all of the important things, all the things that were important when you were self-actualizing, now you're being to look at and say, oh no, that's not so important to me now. I'm not that interested in being, all of this wealth. I'm not that interested in being the best at that. I want to find out who I am at the deepest level of my being, and find empathy and compassion in the world. So that's the journey of the soul, and full marks for the ego for doing its job, but not too driven by fears. Okay, so otherwise you're going to have to overcome that before you can really self-actualize and self-realize.
So part of where I've come to on my own journey, Richard, along this line is I have really come to the notion that I believe aligns with yours, but you tell me if I've got this right. I've come to the notion that, what if the whole reason we're here is to get present to our really present and connected to who we are as a soul, and connected to our purpose, and to live that so that we really make a contribution that elevates the consciousness of the world. That's kind of what I've come to in terms of my own spiritual journey.
Well, yes, but that journey starts with elevating your consciousness, and that's really the most important part. I mean, we all want to do things to other people, but you've got to start with yourself.
Yes.
That's like, I want to be a leader. Well, start by leading yourself. If you can't lead yourself, how are you going to lead others? So for the soul, there are three important things. One is self-expression. Secondly, connection, so you can make a difference. And then contribution to society. And so these are the upper levels of consciousness. After you self-actualize, you begin to move into your self-expression, connection, and contribution. And as long as you can do that, your soul will flourish and you'll find joy in your life. Whereas if you're still trying to get your ego needs met, you might be happy one day when you get a promotion, but the next day you've completely forgotten about it. Or you want a new car and you get happy when you get the new car, but the day after or 2 days later, you've forgotten about it. That happiness is the shortest lasting emotion there is. Whereas joy, which comes from the fulfillment of the soul's desires, is the longest emotional experience.
So delightful. I want to comment on what you said here, but let's grab our first break. It comes by so fast. It's amazing. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. We've been on the air with Richard Barrett, a globally recognized thought leader in values-based leadership, cultural transformation, personal development, and the metrics of personal, cultural, and societal well-being. We've been talking a bit about his work, especially anchored in the realm of the soul. After the break, I will comment back on what he just talked about with soul and joy, and we'll also talk about the people that actually don't believe in this business. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, as I'm dedicated to creating a world where people realize their potential at work and are led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So my latest one came out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization: How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders understand the lay of the land in today's workforce. What do they want and need? And then I offer 22 best practices to help equip those organizations to create that for them. You can find my books at my personal site, alisecortez.com, and also on Amazon. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Richard Barrett, who has authored numerous books, including What My Soul Told Me and The New Leadership Paradigm, Leading Self, Leading Others, Leading an Organization, Leading Society, to name just a couple. So I promised I would respond back to what you were saying before we get on the break here, Richard, that I just thought was so interesting about this notion of expressing the soul, and I believe you talk about this as inspiration.
Yes.
But I remember very distinctly, Richard, I had started teaching college here at University of Phoenix and Southern Methodist University in 2011. And I got so electrified to be back in the world of academia again. And I was teaching various psychology courses. And I just was like, there was something in me that just said, Alise, you have to go back and expand on your your doctoral research on meaning and work and identity. And it was such a governing call. Like I just could not resist it. And I gave myself over to it. And the rest, shall we say, is history, because that is really what set me on this path that I'm on today, where I'm squarely in the meaning and the purpose camp. And it was totally me being obedient to that inspiration, that message.
So what you're saying to me is, you first of all, you got a soul impulse. You surrendered to that impulse.
Yes.
And your life changed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that happened to me many years ago, over 20, 30 years ago. I was still at the World Bank, but I was already teaching personal transformation, and I was doing a workshop in Boulder, Colorado, on finding meaning and purpose in life, which is your bailiwick, what you do. And so somebody said to me the last afternoon, so what's your purpose? Well, that was a fair enough question, and I had a well-rehearsed answer, which was I'm an internationally recognized speaker and author on personal and organizational transformation. Now, I wasn't, but that was my intention, if you like. Now, when he asked the question, I could not think of those words. The words would not come to me. And it was very embarrassing. And I just closed my eyes for probably 5 or 6 seconds, which is a long time when you've got somebody in front of you who's asking you a question. And out of my mouth came the words, and I'm an architect of global transformation. Now, I'd never said those words. I'd never heard those words. But I realized at that point, that was my soul speaking to me. Just as you had that experience, that was my experience. It was like, okay, so we're up and running, and this is the direction. And then I thought, well, how am I going to be an architect of global transformation? And I thought, well, I don't know, but if that's my soul's message, I can sit back and enjoy the ride. And that's what I did.
I just think it's delightful. Of course, I'm wanting more and more people to become unleashed, if you will, from the tackles, the shove, or other things that prevent them from being able to express that soul. So to that end, Richard, let's talk about values. Values are very, very, very important in your world and work. And speak to us a bit about why are you so anchored in the world of values?
So, well, that was basically during when I left the World Bank as a transportation engineer and became a transformation engineer, let's put it that way.
I do remember that in your book. I love that.
That's what I focused on. I focused on extending Maslow's model and creating a tool for measuring value so you could actually measure culture in an organization. And over 20 years, that just mushroomed and grew and now is used all over the world by major companies. And it's a tool for measuring culture and deciding what type of culture people want in the organization. So why values? Okay, so because when we grow up in a world of beliefs and subconscious beliefs and conscious beliefs. Now, beliefs are may or may not be true. But they're not a great way of making decisions when the world is changing very rapidly around you. And so you need something much more significant to anchor your decisions. And to anchor your decisions in your values is a much better way to go than anchoring in your beliefs. Your beliefs may be true or may not be true. I mean, one time we believed the earth was flat. And so if you made decisions based on the world was flat, you were not going to get very far because you sailed off the edge of the world. Now, so I believe that we should shift from belief-based decision-making to values-based decision-making. Values lie at the very heart of who you are and what's important to you and take you closer to your soul, because your soul has very important values which are about connecting, create self-expression, connection, and contribution. So your soul is very into a sense of oneness, of being connected to other souls, because at one level we are all aspects of the universal energy field, and so in that sense we already are all connected. So values are what I realized was I talked about values in organizations and went to organizations all over the world and made speeches about values. I understood that I was actually talking about the soul, although I didn't broadcast that, although my second book was called Liberating the Corporate Soul. And in that book, I explained this method of measuring values. But I didn't go too deeply into it at that time. I'm going back 20 years now. Mm-hmm. But now I do believe that we all have a shared set of values which have to do with creativity, self-expression, connection, empathy, compassion, and they all originate from the depth of our being, from the soul.
You know where it gets really interesting for me now, having had you generate that around values, is I am schooled in logo philosophy or logotherapy, Dr. Viktor Frankl's work, which is existential psychology, of course. And so that puts forth, logo philosophy puts forth the idea that our main concern as humans is finding meaning, and that we have three sources of meaning available to us. That is our creative contributions, the experiences and encounters that we have, and our attitudinal mindset. And all of those situations are registered for meaning according to your value system. So what you find meaningful will be different from what I find meaningful, right. Because our values are different. And then so it's very, very, very interesting. And so if you follow that arc to your work around values, right? So I do a lot of work in organizations helping people to understand their values, and I'm amazed how little people are. I meet people and their lives are totally changed because they've just discovered their values and they're 50 years old. Right? Exactly. It's amazing. It's just amazing. And then I'm so grateful I get to do that. So if you could comment a bit about this notion of how your work around values either speaks to or doesn't speak to the world of logotherapy and how we situate meaning.
Yeah. So there are quite a few things you said there, which I want to pick up on. I do believe that is true, that we are looking for meaning and purpose, but most of the world is not there because they haven't got their ego needs met. They have struggled to survive. They struggle to find love and be accepted, and they struggle to be acknowledged. And these are the needs of the ego. And practically 80 or 90% of the world, that's where they are. They haven't got to meaning and purpose yet because they haven't been through that individuating stage. Now, to get through the individuating, first of all, you've got to meet your ego's needs. And so I do believe that the big task that we have is to help people to find or live in a society where they can get these needs met. Now, one of the few places on the planet where this is true is in Scandinavian countries, where they got onto this idea many years ago in the mid 1800s and taught people personal growth and created cultures where everybody benefits. So people in those countries, and you're going to laugh at this, they enjoy paying taxes because everybody benefits. Compare that to America and the UK. Nobody enjoys paying taxes, but in Scandinavia, they enjoy it because it lifts the whole of society. Now, you see, that's a different value system. I call that people awareness. In the USA, you live in a worldview of wealth awareness and what I call nation awareness. And actually, the worldview in the USA is descending even to a lower level in recent years. And so that is true in some European countries, it's not just the USA. So your value system basically is built around your worldviews and the worldview that you live inside. And now that worldview and those values may not coincide with the values of the soul, but they are the values that you have to embrace, the beliefs and values you have to embrace every day to get your needs met and to self-actualize in that framework of existence. And so as you grow and develop, your values change. They move up Maslow's hierarchy. And I extended Maslow's hierarchy to create the 7 levels of consciousness model, which is basically what I'm most known for. And that's the basis of the cultural measurement tools that I invented. And it's also the basic of the 7 stages of psychological development. So, so what we do is we create, during those first 20 odd years of our life, a sort of false self, a self that is designed to get our needs met in the environment in which we live. Now, behind that false self is this true self, which is the soul, the values of the soul. And in addition to your true self, there's a unique self. Now, that unique self is that self which has this specific mission and purpose in life. And it's only you have that particular mission in the way that you can do it. And when you align your values of your true self, that's the values of the soul, with your unique self, you move into self-realization. But the trick is to somehow shift those values and beliefs of the false self into those higher order values. And you can see what they are when you look at Maslow's work and my 7 levels of consciousness model.
By the way, when I did my meaning and work and identity research, Richard, for the second time, the postdoc, I interviewed 115 men and women between the ages of 18 and 80 across 20 different professions. And when I coded for the meaning levels, I did it also along Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which was it just seemed like it was just a natural sort of thing.
Absolutely.
And so, and of course, you won't be surprised that the higher the level of meaning, the more that along Maslow's hierarchy that was registered in the work, the more important the work was in terms of the person's sense of self or who they were being in the world, or there was no distinction between the two, if you will.
Exactly, yeah. So they were living authentically.
Yes.
And you see, when you're not living authentically, you feel uncomfortable. Now, this new book I'm working on, I just the last 2 days, I came up with what I consider to be a revolutionary title, and I don't know whether I'm going to use it, but it's called Psychological Homeostasis. Now, we know what homeostasis is: the body keeping everything in regular order, and pH levels and temperature and everything. But the body knows how to do that. And when it can't do it, you have pain. And when you get pain, then the higher order entity, you and your mind, I've got pain. So the body's no longer functioning properly in homeostasis, and you go to the doctor and get it fixed. Okay, so how about psychological homeostasis? Because there is a feedback loop. And I just mentioned it, when you're not living authentically, you feel uncomfortable, or when you have an fear-based emotional reaction, you feel really bad. You get really upset, and then later on you're really upset that you got upset. And these are feedback loops, exactly as homeostasis feedback loops in a psychological environment. And so my whole idea of this new book is to think, well, how can we map the feedback you get from your mind through your emotions and feelings in order to find your true development. Just as the body knows how to live its life, but when it gets out of kilter, if you like, it finds it difficult to work. So when you get out of kilter in your psychological development, you can call on your soul.
I can't wait to read it. On that note, let's take our last break here. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. We've been on the air with Richard Barrett. He is a globally recognized thought leader in values-based leadership, cultural transformation, personal development, and the metrics of personal, cultural, and societal well-being. We've been getting more deep into the notion of soul and consciousness. After the break, I do want to still talk a little bit about the naysayer aspect of this work. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. I mentioned in the last break that my latest book came out. It's called The Great Revitalization. What I did for you is I created a free 3-page organizational assessment to help you understand the extent to which your current culture is meeting the needs of today's discerning workforce. You can find it at my website and download it. The website is gusto-now.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Richard Barrett, who has authored numerous books, including What My Soul Told Me and The New Leadership Paradigm, Leading Self, Leading Others, Leading an Organization, Leading Society, to name just a couple. So as I mentioned before, I think it would be remiss of us maybe if we didn't talk about the people that probably are like, this is all crazy. This is just, we don't have soul, and we're just atoms, etc. I was watching a podcast with a materialist scientist who does actually acknowledge spirituality, but he's adamant that we don't have souls. Right. I'm sure you have been posed this question numerous times over the years. What do you say to those people?
Well, I know I have a soul because it's a personal experience. And okay, so you can't do a repeated experiment on everybody that says, look, yes, everybody has a soul. But when you've spent 30, 35 years working with your soul and understanding your soul and getting these inspirational moments, you can't deny there is something bigger than you are. Now, there are other areas of the globe where this is more fully understood. For example, in the Far East, it's well understood that the body is an energy field, and actually understood by Einstein also. It just hasn't filtered down into the academics. If you look around, when was it, 1940, 50, and 60, and 1970, the thought leaders were people like Maslow, Roberto Assagioli from Italy, Carl Jung. Every one of them had an idea of the psychology with a soul. I mean, Assagioli had a map of the mind with the soul at the center. Mm-hmm. So what I say to these people is, look, fine, why don't you do some research? Why don't you think out of the box and look at what was around 50, 60, 70 years ago? It was very much understood that the psychology had a soul. Now, the soul went out of psychology because it became academic. And it became behavioral. Mm-hmm. And in my book, A New Psychology of Human Well-Being, which I wrote a few years ago now, my whole purpose for that book was bring the soul back to psychology, because it's been kicked out by the academics. And so when I hear these people talking, I'm there's no way I can convince them, and I'm not even going to try. But I just say, why don't you read a little more widely? Because there is so much information out there. Instead of putting your blinkers on and not being willing to think about other ways of being. What's his Keegan has this socialized mind, self-organizing, socialized mind. I've forgotten what the second one is sort of like but the third one is the self-transforming mind. Now, the self-transforming mind is willing to look at its beliefs and change them if necessary. Mm. So what I say to these people is, I don't care if you want to go on believing what you believe. That's fine with me. You'll have problems, you'll have sickness, you'll have all sorts of issues to deal with. But if you really want to lead a life of deep well-being and joy, then open the book in this topic and explore it a little more. Mm-hmm. Because basically these people have got their minds closed, and no point in telling them that, but encouraging them to read wider is one way of moving past that. But I'm not going to waste my time and energy trying to convince somebody, because it's hardly worth it, because people are very fixed in the ideas, particularly academics.
Mm-hmm. I, of course, agree with you. I just had to treat that little area. Now, one thing that's really interesting to me, back to the idea of the East versus the West, I remember the first time I heard this, Richard, I heard it from Paul Skinner, who was a friend of mine who came on my podcast a few years ago. He's also in your city, London. And he mentioned, I had mentioned that my parents had passed in January of 2019. And he said, oh, yeah, my dad dropped the body a few years ago as well. And had never heard that phrase before, drop the body. Right. If you could speak a bit to that, I mean, to me, it makes complete sense. If we are our souls, and we have a vehicle through which we live in this dimension. Right. It makes sense that we just leave it behind when we're ready to move on.
Yes, you see, we understand very little about who we are, and that's the whole point of self-realization, is that to realize, to dig deep into the question of who am I, and eventually you get to the point of recognizing you're a universal being in an individuated form, and that when you die, you simply move from the material world fully into the energetic world. You're already in the energetic world, because actually the mind is an energy field, and it embraces the whole body. So when the body dies, the mind or the energy field leaves. Now, where it goes, I don't know. I have no recollection of past lives or any transitional experiences. But there is so much literature, so much. It made so much sense that you can say, yeah, that makes sense to me, and that's my experience of life, is that it's energetic, and that as I align with my soul, I feel a great sense of well-being. Now, eventually we all die, and the question is, well, how do you want to die? Do you want to die peacefully? Do you want to die with regrets? Do you want to die painfully? Sometimes we do die painfully, but the question is, are you at ease with the idea of leaving behind the body, as you put it? Are you at ease with that idea of leaving behind your body? It's a difficult idea to get used to. Mm-hmm. I'm nearly 80 years. Next year I'll be 80 years old. And so my mother lived to be 100. And in many ways, she had a small life. What do I mean by that? She never had a driving license. She never had a passport. She lived in a local community. She was the cleaner at the local Methodist chapel. She arranged flowers. She made the chapel beautiful for people. And that was her life. And she self-expression. And she lived in the community and made the community feel better when they came to the chapel. And she lived to be 100. Mm-hmm. I want to do that. Mm-hmm. I want to make people feel better. I want them to feel good about who they are. And so...
so do I.
And so I think, I was just thinking when I was working on my book this morning, there are three areas where we build our self-esteem. You can build self-esteem through power, and you don't have to look too far in America to find that. You can build your self-esteem through authority, and you can build your self-esteem through influence. And I think people like yourself and myself, one of the reasons that when we're younger we feel good about ourselves is because we're able to influence things. Later on, you don't care about self-esteem. It's like, what? I don't know. I'm not interested in self-esteem. I'm a whole person. I don't have to get feedback from the world that I'm a good person. I don't need that. I know I'm a good person. I know I'm a soul having a human experience. But in the earlier years and the middle years, these are the three of the areas where we derive our self-esteem. And I was thinking, I think I would tick the box on influence if I had to. But actually, I think for me, my self-esteem, if I really have any self-esteem, is like I embrace love, basically. And when I go and speak in organizations, to the leadership team or to the whole company or whatever, as I walk onto the stage, I get the organizers to play the Beatles tune, All I Need Is Love.
I loved it when you said that in your book. Yes, I think that's delightful.
Yeah, so I walk onto the stage and everybody's going, all you need is love. Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I've set them up. I've set them up to receive the words that are going to come from my soul. And it's true. It's like, can you bring love into the workplace? In your relationships with other people? I know sometimes people have to be sacked and things happen about cutbacks, etc. But can you do that with love?
Yeah.
is my question.
Well, I am heartened myself, Richard, that I hear that, four-letter word being used more frequently in the world of business. And certainly Lance Secreton is hugely an advocate of that, embraces that idea of love. Everything is about love. And
when you said the four-letter word, I thought,
yeah, that four-letter word, So I'm encouraged by it, Richard, that it's becoming more normative, if you will, to talk about love in the world of business.
Yeah. It is because the world is evolving, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, and particularly in the democratic countries, where we are more allowed to be who we are. In the country, most of the world live in autocratic countries, and you really can't self-actualize in those countries because you can't become who you really are, particularly if you're gay or lesbian. My God, you could be in prison or even didn't. Now that was true in the UK. It was in 1960 something that they abolished the punishment for gays and lesbians. I mean, that's not long ago. It was in my lifetime.
Seriously, yeah.
And so, but yeah, bringing it back to a personal level, the key is to connect with your soul and follow the impulses of your soul. Now, I'm going to do something which I don't know whether it's going to work or not, but anyhow, so 2.5 years ago, I was in the middle of a book and I got the impulse from my soul to stop writing and start painting.
Yes.
And I knew immediately that I wanted to paint portraits. And I said to myself, okay, if this is true, then I need to practice my skills. So I set myself a study program, studying the masters, practicing, etc. And that's 2.5 years ago. And I've just about got to the point where I feel like I found my niche. And here is my latest painting.
It's beautiful, just beautiful.
And that's my Christmas card to most of my friends, which I just finished that today. So I do believe that when you follow your soul impulse and you apply yourself, now there's the key, you have to apply yourself, you can do and become anything that your soul wants to become. As you found out when you went to the university and had that experience or that impulse to study what your dissertation had been about.
Oh, Richard, so we've come to the end of the show already. It goes by so fast. This program is listened to by people around the world who really are interested in elevating their own experience and performance as a leader and creating and being part of organizations that really are elevated in consciousness. What would you like to leave them with?
Well, I think I'd like to leave with the thought that there is a pathway to enlightenment or to this higher way of being, and it's important to follow your journey, be on your journey, and to have an open mind, to be willing to read very widely, because there are many paths to enlightenment. There are many paths, but you have to find your path, and so the other two things are examine your values, as you pointed out, but more importantly, understand your fears and how are they contributing to your well-being. Can you let them go?
What a gift you are. This is our Christmas gift to our listeners and viewers. You are my Christmas present, Richard. I'm so grateful to know you, and I look forward to reading your next book and certainly having you come back on. Thank you for coming on Working on Purpose.
Well, it's been a delight and a pleasure. And what can I say? Happy Christmas to all the listeners or all the viewers. Wish you well-being.
Thank you, Richard. Listeners and viewers, you're going to want to learn more about this amazing man, Richard Barrett, his work and his books. And the one thing you can do to start that process is go to his website. It's barrettacademy.com. So BARRETT academy.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcasts. We were on air with Dr. Andrew Kadar talking about his experience and learnings of becoming a patient as he stepped out of his role as an anesthesiologist in medicine to having emergency open heart surgery. It was an incredibly tender and moving story, and he offered many ways to improve how healthcare is practiced and how patients can more effectively steward their own healing journey. Next week, we'll be on the air with Christy Predinger, talking about how she has grown her company called WG Content, which provides healthcare organizations with website content through an extreme focus of kindness and work-life harmony. See you there for another inspiring educational conversation. And remember, work is one of the best means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.